The baby's eyes were wrong. Samuel McCready's calloused hands trembled as he held the newborn, still slick from birth, while Martha Henley lay gasping on blood-soaked sheets. The child's eyes, pale as winter ice, nearly colorless, stared up at him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. They were the exact eyes he'd seen 15 years ago, boring into him from across a smoky saloon before the gunfight that changed everything. "Sam?" Martha's voice cracked through exhausted whispers. "Is the baby? Is she all right?" He forced his face into stillness, the way he'd learned during those years when his reputation with a Colt .45 kept food on tables and enemies in graves. "She's perfect," he lied, wrapping the infant in clean linen. But those eyes, Christo's eyes, followed him as he moved. Martha had arrived at his ranch 3 months ago, heavy with child and hollow with grief. Her husband had died in a mining accident up in Silver Creek, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a baby growing in her belly. Samuel, whose own wife had died of fever 2 winters past, had taken her in without question. It was what decent folks did. His ranch sat in a valley where the wind carried secrets and the mountains kept them. 20 head of cattle, a sturdy cabin, and enough land to disappear if a man needed to. Samuel had built this life carefully, deliberately, after hanging up his guns and walking away from the kind of reputation that followed a man like smoke. But now, staring into this newborn's impossible eyes, the past crawled up his spine like a spider. Martha struggled to sit up, reaching for her daughter. "Let me hold her, Sam." He placed the baby in her arms, watching Martha's face transform with love so pure it made him ache. She had no idea. How could she? The resemblance was in details only Samuel would recognize. The unusual eye color, the shape of the small ears, the way the baby's tiny fingers curved just so. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley like distant gunfire. Samuel walked to the window, his reflection ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. 15 years ago, he'd put 3 bullets in Cristo Mendoza's chest over a card game gone wrong. He'd watched the life drain from those pale, unnatural eyes, while Mendoza whispered something in Spanish that sounded like a curse. Now those same eyes stared at him from Martha's baby. The storm was getting worse. "What are you going to name her?" Samuel asked, pouring coffee with hands that barely shook. Martha smiled, exhausted but radiant. "Elena, it means light." She gazed down at the sleeping infant. "She's going to be beautiful, don't you think? Those eyes, I've never seen anything like them." Samuel's coffee turned to ash in his mouth. Elena Henley, but if his suspicions were right, she wasn't Henley blood at all. The timing worked. Martha's husband had been dead 8 months, but she'd been 6 months along when she arrived. Someone else was this baby's father. Someone with Cristo Mendoza's eyes. "Martha," he sat heavily in the chair beside her bed. "Tell me about your husband, about before he died." Her smile faded. "Why? Just curious. You don't talk about him much." She was quiet for a long time, stroking Elena's dark hair. Outside, the storm hammered the roof like angry fists. "Thomas was a good man," she finally said, "but he wasn't Elena's father." Samuel's blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "I was already carrying when I married Thomas." He knew. Tears started down her cheeks. "The real father, he was a drifter, charming, dangerous, said his name was Cristo." She looked up at Samuel with desperate eyes. "He left before I could tell him about the baby. Thomas married me anyway, gave the child a name, but now Thomas is dead and I'm alone and, Cristo what?" Samuel's voice came out rough as sandpaper. "I don't know his last name. He never said." Martha's hands tightened on the baby. "Sam, you're scaring me. Why does it matter?" Samuel stood abruptly, pacing to the fireplace. Cristo Mendoza was dead. He'd made sure of that. But men like Cristo had brothers, cousins, sons. The Mendoza family was poison that spread through the territory like wildfire, leaving blood and broken lives in their wake. "If they knew about this baby, it doesn't matter," he said finally. "You're safe here." But even as he said it, he heard riders approaching through the storm. 3 horses, moving careful and deliberate through the rain. Samuel's hand moved instinctively to where his gun used to hang, finding only empty air. Martha heard them too. Sam, who would be riding in weather like this? He moved to the window, peering through the darkness. Lightning illuminated 3 figures on horseback, waiting at the edge of his property line like wolves testing the wind. They weren't seeking shelter, they were watching. "Stay here," Samuel ordered, moving toward the gun cabinet. "Keep Elena quiet." "Sam, what's happening?" He pulled out his old Colt, checking the cylinder with practiced efficiency. The weight felt both foreign and familiar in his hands. "The past," he said grimly. "It's catching up." The knock came an hour later. 3 sharp raps that cut through the storm like gunshots. Samuel stood behind the door, Colt drawn but held low. Martha sat frozen on the bed, Elena pressed against her chest. The baby had started crying 20 minutes ago, and wouldn't stop, as if she sensed the danger circling their small sanctuary. "Samuel McCready." The voice carried a slight accent, cultured but dangerous. "We know you're in there. Don't know any McCready." Samuel called back, though his throat felt lined with dust. Soft laughter. "The man who killed my brother might have changed his name, but I'd know that voice in hell itself." A pause. "My name is Diego Mendoza. I believe you have something that belongs to my family." Samuel's blood turned to ice water. Through the window, he could see the other 2 riders positioned at angles that would cut off any escape routes. These weren't random drifters. They'd planned this carefully. "I don't know what you're talking about," Samuel said. "The baby, McCready. Christo's baby. Did you really think we wouldn't find out?" Diego's voice carried cruel amusement. "My brother had a way with women before you murdered him. We've been tracking his legacy for 15 years now." Martha's face went white as understanding crashed over her. She clutched Elena tighter, and the baby's cries intensified. "Sam," she whispered. "What does he mean?" Samuel moved to the window, staying low. Diego Mendoza sat his horse like a king surveying his domain, tall, dark-haired, with the same pale eyes that now stared up from Elena's face. The family resemblance was unmistakable. "The child is innocent," Samuel called out. "Innocent?" Diego laughed. "She carries Mendoza blood. That makes her family, and family belongs with family." His voice hardened. "Send her out, McCready. Send them both out, and maybe you live through this night." Samuel's mind raced through options, all of them bad. The Mendozas were known for their long memories and creative revenge. If they took Elena and Martha, neither would survive the week. But the cabin had only 1 door, and 3 men with rifles were better odds than most gunfighters could handle. "You have 1 minute to decide," Diego called. "Then we come in shooting." Martha was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as she rocked Elena. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen. I didn't know I didn't know he was dead." Samuel looked at her. This woman who'd brought light back into his dark world, who'd trusted him with her safety and her child's future. She deserved better than to die for his sins. "There's a root cellar behind the kitchen," he said quietly. "Take Elena and get down there. Don't come out no matter what you hear." "What are you going to do?" Samuel checked his ammunition one last time. 6 bullets against 3 men. His hands were steady now, muscle memory taking over. "What I should have done 15 years ago," he said. "Finished it." Outside, Diego Mendoza began counting down from 60. "Wait." Martha's voice stopped him as he reached for the door latch. "Sam, look at me." He turned, and she was holding out a small silver locket, tarnished and dented, but gleaming in the firelight. "This was my mother's," she said. "She gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to someone who showed me what real love looked like." Samuel stared at the locket, something breaking open in his chest. "Martha, you took us in when we had nothing. You delivered Elena with your own hands. You were going to die for us just now." She pressed the locket into his palm, her fingers warm against his skin. "That's not duty, Sam. That's love." Elena had stopped crying, her strange pale eyes fixed on Samuel's face with an expression that seemed far too knowing for a newborn. He reached out hesitantly, touching one tiny fist with his scarred finger. The baby's hand opened and closed around it, holding tight. "She's not Christo's daughter," Martha whispered. Not in any way that matters. She's mine, and if you'll have us, she's yours too. Something shifted in Samuel's world, like tectonic plates settling into new alignment. For 15 years, he'd carried the weight of killing Cristo Mendoza, not guilt, exactly, because Mendoza had been pure poison, but the knowledge that violence followed him like a shadow. Now looking down at Elena's face, he saw not his enemy's legacy but possibility, hope. 30 seconds, Macready. Diego's voice cracked like a whip. Samuel closed his hand around the locket, feeling its weight. Martha, promise me something. If I don't walk back through that door, you will. Promise me, take Elena somewhere safe, raise her to be good, better than any of us. He met her eyes. Promise me she'll never know this world of guns and blood. Martha's face was fierce with determination. I promise, but you're coming back, Sam Macready, because we need you, because she needs a father who'll teach her right from wrong. 10 seconds. Samuel kissed Martha's forehead, then bent down to brush his lips against Elena's tiny head. The baby smelled like hope and new beginnings. Get to that cellar, he said. And Martha, whatever you hear up here, don't look back. She nodded, gathering Elena against her chest. As she moved toward the kitchen, Samuel caught his reflection in the window glass. No longer the haunted drifter who'd built this ranch as a hiding place, but a man with something worth fighting for. Outside, Diego Mendoza's countdown reached 0. Samuel Macready opened the door and stepped into the storm. The gunfight lasted 12 seconds. Samuel came out shooting, diving left as Diego's rifle barked in the darkness. The Mendoza brothers had expected him to emerge talking, maybe try to negotiate. They hadn't expected the man who'd once been known as the fastest gun in 3 territories to come out with cold fury and perfect aim. His first shot took Diego center mass, spinning him from the saddle. The second caught Miguel Mendoza in the shoulder as he wheeled his horse around. The third man, a cousin named Raphael, got one shot off that splintered the doorframe before Samuel's fourth bullet found its mark. When the smoke cleared and the thunder rolled away, 3 horses stood riderless in the rain. Samuel walked among the bodies, checking each one with professional thoroughness. Diego Mendoza stared up at the stormy sky with those pale dead eyes, the same eyes that had haunted Samuel's dreams for 15 years, but they didn't look the same anymore. In Elena's face, those eyes held wonder and innocence. In Diego's they held only emptiness. It's over, Samuel called toward the cabin. Come up, Martha. She emerged from the root cellar like hope rising from darkness, Elena cradled against her chest. The baby was calm now, as if she somehow knew the danger had passed. Martha looked at the bodies, then at Samuel, and nodded once. She understood what kind of man she'd asked to protect them. They buried the Mendoza brothers in unmarked graves on the far side of the valley, where the wind would scatter their memory like dust. Samuel burned their belongings and sent their horses running toward Mexico with switched brands. Some secrets were meant to stay buried. 3 days later, Elena laughed for the first time, a sound like silver bells in sunlight. Samuel was holding her while Martha cooked breakfast, and the baby reached up to grab his nose with tiny determined fingers. When she laughed, her pale eyes crinkled with pure joy, and Samuel realized he'd been wrong about them all along. They weren't Cristo's eyes, they were Elena's eyes, and they held nothing but love. That evening, Martha found him on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Any regrets? She asked, settling beside him. Samuel looked down at the silver locket now hanging around his neck. A promise and a new beginning. None, he said. Not a single one. Years later, Elena Macready would grow up knowing only sunshine and safety, her father's dark past buried deeper than winter frost. She would learn to ride and rope, to read and write, to see the good in people before the bad. And sometimes, when the light hit her pale eyes just right, visitors would comment on their unusual beauty, never knowing they looked upon the transformation of a curse into a blessing, violence reborn as love. Samuel kept his guns in the cabinet, after that oiled but unused. Some battles, he learned, were won not with bullets but with choice, the choice to build rather than destroy, to love rather than fear, to see redemption in a baby's innocent gaze. The storm had passed, the valley held its peace,